Good afternoon, everyone. Illinois Extension is happy to host another Illinois Office of Broadband series of presentations with you. This series is the Illinois Broadband Labs Summer Series, and we are really thankful to get this guidance for grant applications and grant management today. And having folks on to learn about Prevailing Wage and the Illinois Works Apprenticeship Program. We're happy to welcome Matt Schmidt, Deputy Director for Broadband within the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and he'll be introducing colleagues who will cover that those standards for Prevailing Wage and the apprenticeship opportunities that all really work to just boost employment, wages, and economic benefits across the state. And we are really looking forward to some discussion after the presentations today. Potential applicants or participants can ask questions about how to utilize these standards and these opportunities within the scope of their projects. And namely for broadband infrastructure, those questions for Matt are welcome. Please also just be reminded that you can use the chat box and put those questions in at any time. And then we'll have a list to start with for the Q&A if you can do that. Matt, just want to say before handing it over to you, thank you so much for the entire series that you've planned with the Illinois Broadband Lab and Illinois Extension. It's giving a great amount of value to communities and leaders across the state, and we're grateful to you, and we're also grateful to the experts on the line today for your time and to come onto the platform and educate us. So let me pass it to you now for our main program. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Nancy, and thanks, Mike, and thanks everybody at the University of Illinois Extension for your great support over the years and over the past couple of weeks here as we launch into the summer webinar series. And so we're back on track A today, talking about various aspects of the application process, various state grant requirements, and then how to be a successful grantee once everything comes together for you. And so today might be the most important webinar that our office has ever hosted. It's incredibly important for our applicants to understand state requirements writ large, but Prevailing Wage in our Illinois Works Apprenticeship Program are absolutely paramount. And so I'm going to not talk too much. I'm going to hand the mic over. But before I do so, I just want to frame today's conversation in the webinar series frame that we've stood up this summer. Of course, Track A focused on guidance for applicants and grant management. Track B focused on broadband and digital equity education and opportunities. If you had a chance to join us last week, you saw the community role in broadband development. Next week, that team will be looking at broadband technologies and engaging in different aspects of broadband builds. And so, as Nancy mentioned, all of this content is curated at the University Extension website. We link to it directly from our Office of Broadband website. Check out these webinars if you've missed any. This is a great source of information for community-based organizations, local governments, providers, who know there's a historic investment in broadband taking place right now and new opportunities in digital equity programming, and you want to learn more, how you can be part of it. And so Track A and Track B designed to complement each other, and I just really do encourage folks to participate and reach out offline if you've got any questions. So with that said, I'm really eager to introduce a couple of my colleagues today. We have Craig Colebrook from the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, Department of Legal Counsel, as well as his colleague, Jeanette Pesamoska, who might not be addressing questions up front, but both Craig and Jeanette have been great resources for our Office of Broadband within the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. And so without further ado, Craig, the mic is yours.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Just barely afternoon, but afternoon nonetheless. My name is Craig Colebrook. As Matt said, I am Deputy General Counsel for the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. And I have a pretty significant background in labor matters and the Prevailing Wage Act. So I'm going to try to give you a pretty brief overview of it today, hopefully demystify some of it. I'm also going to recognize and give a chance to speak to some of our colleagues from the Department of Labor and the Illinois Office of Comptroller as they factor into the Prevailing Wage Act. And hopefully this, like I said, demystifies some of it and gives you a little more certainty as you start on these projects. If nothing else, we're going to give you the vocabulary so that when a question arises, you know what to ask us, and you can always reach out to me. I'm sure our colleagues in the other agencies will say the same thing. So we're just going to dive right in. The Illinois Prevailing Wage Act. I have the statutory site there for you, but I don't know how much that's really going to matter for you folks. But it's a simple idea. If tax dollars are used on a construction or a demolition project, then the workers on that project should be paid a competitive wage. The idea behind this is we don't want there to be any races to the bottom where the different contractors or different bidders keep trying to undercut each other by paying workers less and less. And we want to level the playing field so that some contractor who is paying people a very competitive wage isn't at a competitive disadvantage to someone who's going to undercut them. We want to make sure that everyone has an equal shot at these jobs, or that at least someone who has a better shot at getting one of these projects than another, they're not doing it on the backs of their workers. Am I controlling these slides or are you, Matt? There we go. So the first question with this is, what are public works? Because the Prevailing Wage Act attaches to any public works projects. So what are these? If you went into that statute and you read the definition of public works, you would need to block out quite a bit of your afternoon to do it. Sometimes when I do a presentation on prevailing wage for other lawyers, I put all of the text in there and it takes up 3 or 4 slides. But that is just a joke for them. I don't want to waste you guys' time with that. The basic idea is that any construction or demolition project paid for with tax dollars is almost certainly a public works project. There are exceptions and caveats and provisos and other silliness. I mean, the legislature has changed stuff to get all of its pet projects in there or to exclude certain things, but that's the basic idea. And for our purposes today, what you really need to know is, yes, every one of these broadband projects is absolutely a public works project that prevailing wage attaches to. So everyone involved with one of these projects is going to have to abide by the terms of the Prevailing Wage Act to the extent that it applies to them. If we can get the next slide here. So I want to go over the responsibilities for a couple of the different major players here. And we'll start with the grantees themselves, the people who have been awarded a broadband grant from the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. The big thing that the grantee has to do is make sure that the contractors know that this is a public works project and that they have to pay prevailing wage in the project. So prevailing wage language must be in all RFPs, all bid documents, all contracts, everything. You need to make sure that everyone is well aware. Now, we have language in our office that we use that we can share with you. And we are happy to share that with you. Give me 1 second, please. I'm sorry. Sorry about that, a little technical problem on my end. So that's the basic part of your responsibilities under the statute. From time to time, we at DCO might ask you for more information on payment or communication with the contractor. We've had some situations where we've gone to the grantee and said, we know that this contractor or this sub on the project has been having trouble filing payrolls or paying prevailing wage. Can you help us talk to them? And we, appreciate that you help us do that. We've even seen some of our grantees actually put pressure on contractors and subs to fix the problems. So we appreciate all of that help. I think it's kind of incumbent on the grantee as a good partner in this project to provide help like that. But your statutory duties is to make sure that everyone knows that this is a prevailing wage public works project. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, we're already there. So your contractors and your subcontractors, what are their responsibilities? Prime contractors have to make sure that all of the subs know that it's a public works project and that they have to pay prevailing wage. Again, it has to be in all RFPs, bid documents, contracts, etc. And all contractors, primes and subs, are responsible for proper payment, paying the right amount to the right worker, and filing payrolls, certified payrolls, with the Illinois Department of Labor. So we're going to take a minute to talk about certified payrolls, because certified payrolls are they're the backbone of all prevailing wage issues. They're the text that we're all going to look at to see what was paid to who. So they're a record that details who was paid how much, including fringe benefits, for how much work in any given 2-week period. They are certified payrolls because someone with authority to sign on behalf of the contractor signs and attests that they are all true and accurate. So every contractor working on a public works project in the state, every contractor, every sub, anything, they've all got to file them with the Department of Labor every 2 weeks. And now we at DCEO are also asking for copies of payrolls on these broadband projects because we are trying to see if there's any problems ahead of time before they get to a stage of litigation or investigation. So we're going to be looking at these payrolls too to kind of help you see if there was a problem arising, if there's something that you can work on. If you share them with us, we'll be able to spot things faster and we'll be able to correct any problems there are before it gets to the stage where Department of Labor opens up an investigation or the comptroller's office starts threatening to withhold funds. So DOL accepts a lot of different formats for payrolls so long as the information is all there. And I've got 2 links here. The first one is to their portal where you would upload the payrolls. Now, Department of Labor does its own training on how to upload these things, and I don't want to step on their toes. They're also going to be a lot more knowledgeable in how their uploading process works. So I encourage you to listen to them about that, and participate in their trainings when they offer them. But this is the link. I don't know, can we click on it and just go to the website real quick? I know they've been having some technical difficulties lately, but maybe we can give it a try. That first link, can we follow it? If not, that's okay.
Sure, yeah, we will put that in the chat.
Okay. And the second link is, that's sort of the Department of Labor's, I wouldn't necessarily say it's their preferred form, I just couldn't think of a better term, but it is like the standard one they provide. I would recommend you use it if you have nothing else in mind, just because it is what they've put together. We know everything on it is accurate and what they want to see. As far as that goes, like I said, if you've got questions about how to upload things, that's better for Department of Labor. If you've got questions about what to put in the form, Department of Labor can help, but you can also reach out to us and we will try to help as well.
Craig, real quick, can I comment? As of
Please do.
Bob Pirelli, Illinois Department of Labor, as of April of 20, they're required to submit that electronically by law. It has to go into the CTP portal. And as you already brought in, we'll help out and work out what we need to do with any of the prospective employers. Okay. But it's not a paper copy anymore. It's uploaded into the certified transcript to payroll portal. Okay.
Yeah, and it's probably worth noting too that those then get put on an online database. Any individual identification information for an individual worker is redacted, but the payrolls are put online and can be searched by anyone. Okay, let's move on to the next slide here. Classifications. Okay, so this is probably over the history of this project, this is the biggest issue that we have come across. See, all of the wage rates are based on the kind of work that the worker on the project does. They're all classified into different kinds of jobs. So how do you classify them? It can be especially tricky with broadband because this is a new and emerging field. It doesn't have a whole lot of history behind it the same way that, you know, just running power lines or something does. And I'll be honest, we can't give you a hard and definitive answer that you can take to the bank and rely on in every circumstance, because the circumstances of your work are going to change. It's a very, what we lawyers call a very fact-specific determination. It depends on the specific things going on, the circumstances of each situation. And a lot of it can just depend on the kind of wiring you're doing, the kind of equipment you're working with, you know, the kind of heavy equipment you use to dig a borehole, things like that. I would say most of this work falls into some kind of electrician category. And there is some case law out there from the NLRB. There's actually some international agreements that support that. So it is generally considered electrician work. The precise kind of electrician can depend. We've seen some success with two classifications called electronic systems technician and especially electric power lineman. But I really want to stress that we can't guarantee anything, and it's gonna depend. We're happy as you're getting your project started, we're happy to talk to you more and to get more of the specifics and to give you more particularized advice. But I gotta stress that we can't guarantee everything, though those classifications generally are two good places to start with. Now I've included a link, and we'll drop that in the chat too, where it's the link to Department of Labor's wage rates and classifications. If you follow that link, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but you'll see it's broken down. It's broken down by time, so you'll have to kind of look at when your project occurred. I think for most of you know, we're talking about projects that haven't quite started yet. So the latest wage rates are always going to be the most important ones for you. And then it's broken down by county. Sometimes it's even broken down by different regions of county. Like sometimes you see North and South Madison County or suburban Cook in Chicago, some kind of stuff like that sometimes. And so you just kind of hone in on your area, and then you'll see the whole table of what the wage rates are. It includes the fringe and everything, overtime, fringe, healthcare benefits, pension benefits, stuff like that. So we've included the links so that you can kind of look at it yourself. But again, we're always happy to help you understand things more if you have questions. I want to spend a couple minutes to talk about consequences. This is purely hypothetical because I know all of you guys are going to do everything absolutely perfectly on the first try, and we're never going to have to worry about any of these things. But just to be sure, there are consequences for violating the Prevailing Wage Act. And I will talk about our consequences ourselves, then the different agencies, I'll kick it over to them and let them explain their processes. If you violate the Prevailing Wage Act, you can do this in a few relevant ways. By failing to notify contractors that this is a public works job, failing to file payrolls, failure to pay, etc. First of all, if you do that, you'll upset us. You'll make us very mad. But more to the point, we have clawback mechanisms written into every grant agreement so that we could reclaim grant money. Now, we don't use that very often. We don't use it very often in any situation, but especially in rural broadband, we don't really like to see that. We would rather see the problem corrected rather than us getting the money back. And remember, we're also going to be monitoring your payrolls. So we're going to know if there's problems developing. But again, our reason for doing that is to head these things off at the pass and to correct any problems that develop, not to be punitive, not to punish. We want these projects to succeed as much as anyone. And we know that all of you are coming into this with clean hands and the desire to do a good project for your communities the right way. So we monitor these things just to help you do that, just because we know there's a lot of Byzantine laws in this situation. It's hard to keep track of them all. So we're going to help you do that. And that's why we're monitoring things. But just understand that if we get to a point where you're not correcting the problems that we're identifying, we do have mechanisms we can use to go further. So I'm now going to kick it to Robert Pirelli from the Illinois Department of Labor. They're the primary enforcement agency for prevailing wage claims. And he's going to explain their process a little and explain what happens if if a violation occurs that gets up to their level. Robert, go ahead. Bob, you're muted if you're trying to talk.
Trying to, there it is. It wouldn't let me unmute. I apologize. All right, my name is Bob Pirelli. I'm the division manager for the Illinois Department of Labor Conciliation Mediation Department, which is the entity that does the prevailing wage. The broadband project's an important project to everybody that's in the state, and certainly those who are participating in this meeting today. And I'd certainly love to work with everybody to get to where we're compliant, and I'm not receiving complaints. Compliance over complaints, I'll take every day. The procedures under the Illinois Prevailing Wage Act are that you are required to pay the posted rate, which is the certified rate for the work being done. There is requirements for the contractors to notify, as Craig already brought forth, their subcontractors if in fact the prime is the grantee of the prevailing wage requirements. If you do not have or have questions, contact us. We'll work with you. If there's questions pertaining to classifications, we'll work with you. Electronic systems tech is questionable because it's mostly a building classification, and the majority of this work is outside work, or well, it's not utility under this, but it's similar to that. Those classifications in most cases are the lineman's classification, and they use either all or highway. But when we get into the prevailing wage rates itself, please pay attention. Rates can change. There are allocation upgrades. Our last posting right now, and I know most of the work hasn't started, was July 13th. That was after the annual survey, which we do in the month of June. And we've reviewed 7,500 submissions, and there are rates posted in 102 counties. Pertaining to the CTPs, please upload those in there. If you have problems with that, we can address that. My phone number is on the bottom of that particular entity, the Certified Transcript Payroll Portal. There's also additionally an email address, which is a great asset. A lot of times it's difficult to get directly to me. And I have a conciliator that works and reviews that, and she's wonderful and will address that and guide you in there. Beyond that, I'm looking forward to being able to help and work with you. Again, my goals are compliance as well as Craig's and everybody else on here. Looking forward to getting Illinois up to speed in broadband. So whatever you need, you can reach out to me. That's my email address. There is a second phone number. That is 312-793-3600. You can do either one, but I will try to respond to you as quickly as possible. I am enforcing 16 laws, so there are days where it gets a little bit busy, but I'm looking forward to working with you. We've worked and assisted a number of contractors in the first phases there. And again, as I said, the goal is compliance. And we'll try to help you get there. Okay.
All right, thank you, Bob. I will next kick it over to the Illinois Comptroller's Office. The Comptroller is responsible for paying the state's bills, and this includes paying for state public works projects. And they can delay payment on a project if there are prevailing wage issues. So I would like to introduce Kevin McGuire from the Illinois Office of Comptroller to explain their role in the process. Kevin, go ahead. Kevin, are you around? Can
Is this for?
our,
Okay, hello?
There he is.
there we go.
Okay, sorry about that. I was trying to unmute myself. My name's Kevin McGuire. I'm here with the Office of the Illinois Comptroller. Thank you for the invitation, Craig, and everyone else for your time today. I'm going to give a brief overview of our prevailing wage inquiry portal, kind of what we're doing for public projects, labor, and workers in Illinois. And then I've got our prevailing wage officer, Pat Haynes, on the call as well, and we'll introduce him afterwards here. So as the state's chief fiscal officer, Comptroller Mendoza and our office are, so to speak, the last line of defense for tax dollars spent in the state. The Comptroller Act grants IOC the authority to review payment vouchers for compliance with the law prior to issuing. And in August of 2019, as projects were getting underway for the $45 billion capital plan, Comptroller Mendoza signed her Executive Order 1901. And this executive order created an online portal on our website that allows for inquiries from the public. So if someone believes there is workers on a public works project being paid under the prevailing wage with required fringe benefits, they can enter an inquiry on our website and we'll have the ability to investigate the project. The program puts a new set of teeth into the Prevailing Wage Act in that if we can confirm a violation of the law, we will hold any payments going to that contractor or public body until workers are made whole. Back wages are paid, certified payroll is filed with Department of Labor, and then we have assurances of compliance with the law in the future. We have a dedicated staff working on this program, including myself, our prevailing wage officer, Patrick Haynes, and others in the office. We have a pretty close relationship with Department of Labor that only benefits the taxpayer and the workers of the state. By improving on the efficiency of the investigative process of both agencies. The simple idea here is that if tax dollars are being used on a construction project in Illinois, big or small, the workers on that project need to be paid prevailing wage and the benefits they're owed. There's no races to the bottom. We, alongside DOL, are assuring signatory contractors have a level playing field during the bidding process. When a non-union shop comes in and bids, 25% under union contractors, that difference is usually being made up on the backs of their workers. And when a contractor's payment is withheld, and they're forced to pay back wages and benefits, they'll factor that prevailing wage into the bid on their next project. And this usually allows for healthy competition and also benefits the taxpayer and the public body, whether it's a state agency, school, municipality. And so we're seeing a lot of success with our program. Another benefit I'll mention is education. We've had the ability to educate many school boards, counties, and smaller public bodies on the Prevailing Wage Act, and they're usually very receptive. They may simply take the lowest bidder, that may be their standard process, unaware how one contractor can come in so much lower than all the others. And so taking a closer look up front, And not just going with the lowest, but the lowest responsible bidder usually results in better craftsmanship and a better final product for the taxpayer. So helping public bodies understand their role in oversight of the Prevailing Wage Act has been a huge plus for our program, allowing us to work with contractor, public body to confirm wages, assist them with getting set up with IDOL's portal, helping them get their payroll filed, and then closing cases before the need to hold ever arises. Though the ability to hold a payment for non-compliance has been an excellent tool for those that do refuse to cooperate. So all in all, our program is having a positive effect over the lives of Illinois workers. We're improving the efficiency of state and local governments, preventing prolonged investigations, which is also a cost to taxpayers, by helping the public bodies increase their level of oversight and thwarting bad actors by creating a financial incentive to investigate and comply with the law. And, if I can ever help with anything, I know Department of Labor has a pretty heavy workload. I can probably get back to you same day most times. And if it's not something I can help you with, I'll be sure and get an answer for you. So feel free to reach out with any questions.
Thank you, Kevin. Looks like you have a resource page there for Illinois Department of Labor. And again, some of those links we shared in the chat from these first two presentations.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. So that is the conclusion of our formal presentation. I think might make the most sense to take some questions right now, specifically about prevailing wage, and hopefully get those wrapped up before we move on to Illinois Works. So
No problem.
I see. I'll go through a few in the chat here first, and then some people can speak up if they have more. I see Dina Paradow from our friends at AT&T has asked, when we deploy fiber, there's no electricity riding on these lines, so why should the electric power lineman prevailing wage apply to technicians that deploy these facilities? So a lot of this is built off of international agreements and litigation. Most classification issues arise from sort of case law of litigation between two different trades. And that's how a lot of how it's built off of. I can't speak too much more specifically about how any individual classification was arrived at. I just know that we've seen that when these specific classifications are used, Department of Labor accepts them. It does not say you used the wrong classification for this one. Bob Pirelli, can you, if you're able to give any more specifics on how this is arrived at, please.
I'd be happy to. Based on the collective bargaining agreement, scope of work, national building trades agreements, the determinations on the scope and the appropriate classification have been determined over, in some cases, 100 years. In most of these cases, and the examples that were up with the electronic system tech and the lineman, those are both IBEW or electrician classifications. The electronic system tech pertains more to what's considered building in their collective bargaining agreements, which we adopt to certify the rates. So the answer really is the certified, or the rates are based on collective bargaining agreements, scope of work on that, and what has been adopted, highway, all building throughout the years. So a lot of that falls back on, and I know where, I believe it was AT&T was on there. They have a multitude of agreements with them also, but in most cases, the work that AT&T has would be electronic system tech, or those are standalone agreements with the IBW. We use the agreements that are submitted while we're certifying the rates to determine the classification of the appropriate worker.
Thanks, Bob. And I should add something. I probably should have made a bigger deal about this in the slides, because I found it to be really good advice. A good way to avoid almost all prevailing wage issues is to meet with the trades in the area covering the project up front and hammer out a project labor agreement, because then you've got a framework where everyone has agreed on what the payment is and how, if there's any dispute, how you're going to resolve that. And in most of those cases where there's a project labor agreement, that's going to sidestep any kind of further miscommunication, any kind of further lack of knowledge. It's going to put everything down in black and white so everyone is on the same page. Now we recognize it may not work in every situation, especially sometimes when you're dealing with new technology. You're going to get in front of the trades and you're going to explain the new technology. I've literally seen pre-meetings where they explain a new technology to the trades, and the trades are like, we have no idea what you're talking about, and we don't want to mess with that. So it's going to end up not being any kind of trades work. That happens. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution, but I would say the situations where a project labor agreement makes sense and helps you avoid unpleasantness down the line far outnumber the situations where it doesn't work out. Okay, the next question I see is from Mindy Fiscus. Would this pertain to internal installation, like rewiring a building for wired wireless internet? If so, what technician type would apply? Generally not. There's a few reasons for that. First of all, our broadband grants do not cover that part of the job. That's not going to be built into the scope of work for that project. So that's considered a different project. Our project is kind of laying the, I think a term you guys are always familiar with is like last mile problems, middle mile problems. When we're talking about like actually wiring up the building, that's last mile. Our grants don't cover that part of it. So you're not talking about public funding. So you're not talking about it being a prevailing wage project. The other thing is, if you're talking about your in-house technicians doing that work, I'm thinking of like, the AT&T employee who came in and installed my line and my router and everything here. That's your guy. You're not using a contractor for that. And the Prevailing Wage Act pretty explicitly applies to contractors. So there's two reasons why generally that stuff is not going to be considered public works and it's not going to have to pay prevailing wage. I say generally. I'm sure we could all concoct a hypothetical scenario where it does, and maybe a real scenario where it does. So, if you think you're in that situation, go ahead and ask questions and make sure. But generally speaking, that does not apply. Dana Peridot had another question. Do we need approval to move forward with a project from both the comptroller and DOL? No. You move forward with the project when you're ready to go. If you're on one of our broadband projects, we need to be in communication, but that will come, a lot of that stuff gets worked out as we're nailing down the grant agreement. Your grant agreement will include the terms of the grant. Generally speaking, we don't want you to start before the term of the grant starts, before the grant agreement is signed. But that all gets defined as we hammer out the grant agreement with you. So whereas we kind of need to know what's going on, we will know what's going on, and you don't need to get permission from anyone else to move forward. Okay, a couple more questions that came in. Understanding that prevailing wage laws protect work for local contractors and their employees, how important is this standard as a function of economic development? I mean, that that's sort of a judgment kind of policy question, and I'm trying to do technical legal answers, but it's very important because part of the idea of economic development is to be a rising tide that lifts all boats. So making sure that there are jobs in the area that are paying competitive wages is part of that rising tide. That's kind of all I want to say about that. Matt Schmidt, if you want to chime in with a little bit more about it.
Craig, I think it's a great question, and thanks, Nancy, for raising it. I would say let's bring that up at the end of today's webinar if we've got some time. I think there's a sidebar on that.
Sure. Prevailing wage. Next question is: prevailing wage has been said to retain more of the jobs, income, and spending in the area where the construction work is completed. Do we see additional classifications being added in for infrastructure deployment with broadband or other types of infrastructure? And what challenges, I'm sorry, I lost my place. What challenges do you see on ground levels in terms of compliance or capacity? Feel free to deviate from this question if you have any insight you wish to share around the implementation / compliance of the project requirement. Well, I am a reform trial lawyer, so you are never going to get me to deviate from the bottom line scope of the question. The question of if additional classifications could ever be considered, I think they could be considered. We are looking at a lot of new technology, broadband, solar power, wind power. There's a lot of stuff that does not neatly fit into the existing categories, but DCEO we won't really be a part of those discussions. That's going to be for other policymakers to decide. It does seem like most of the relevant players are muddling through with the existing classifications. So I certainly haven't seen a big push for new classifications or anything. But who knows? I mean, I think I would agree that it doesn't neatly fit in. Some of the work doesn't neatly fit in with existing job titles. So we will see. Oh, I'm sorry. We are starting to run over time here. Let me look at this one last thing. Okay, I think that is all the questions we have right now. And I have gone over time because if you know me at all, I could go on for days about prevailing wage. But it's not nearly as interesting as I think. So thank you for your patience, and I will now trade it over to my colleagues to talk about Illinois Works.
Thank you so much, Craig and Bob and Kevin. We really appreciate your insight and your time talking about prevailing wage today. And I guess I would just emphasize to folks who are interested, if you did have any questions that you didn't have an opportunity to raise yet or put in the chat box, feel free to reach out to us. We want to use this as a start of a conversation that can be of mutual benefit. So to be continued. And we'll also open up the Q&A portion of today's webinar at the tail end for any questions. But without further ado, I'd like to pass the mic to two of my colleagues at the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, Maria Perez and her colleague, Victor Castillo, who have stood up essentially a program from scratch with their colleague, Norman Urano, the Illinois Works Apprenticeship Initiative Program. And so again, without further ado, take it away.
You're muted, Maria. You're muted, Maria.
Yep, your sound sounds great.
Maria, you muted. Here we go.
Can you hear me? Okay, now I can.
I can hear you. Sound great.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. Again, my name is Maria Perez, and I'm the Senior Apprenticeship Initiative Program Manager. My team and I work with state agencies to train on the apprenticeship initiative that mainly focuses on capturing the 10% apprenticeship goal to comply with that 10%. I'll be presenting as well as Victor. Victor, you can please introduce yourself.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Victor Castillo. I'm a program analyst here in Illinois Works. It's good to be here.
Thank you. Before we get started, I want to go over how our program is structured. We work directly with Broadband and all state agencies. And as a result, the state agencies work, whether it's a grantee, a contractor, or a loan recipient. In this case, it would be grantees. They would train and help grantees to comply with the Illinois Works apprenticeship goal. And again, although we are happy to answer your questions today, however, we encourage grantees to work directly with Broadband with any inquiries. Okay, let's get started. Okay, I want to give you general information in regards to the Illinois Works Job Program Act. The first, it's like a puzzle. Each program works in a whole. So this started as a statewide initiative to ensure that all Illinois residents have access to state capital projects and careers in the construction industry, and building trades and provide contracting, employment, and opportunities for historically underrepresented population in the construction industry. Again, this is the three programs are, it works in a puzzle. One cannot work without the other. The first one would be the pre-apprenticeship program, which the pre-apprenticeship program creates a pipeline of candidates to help respond to the demand. The second program is the Illinois Works Bid Credit Program. The Bid Credit Program is essentially an incentive program that our graduates from the pre-apprenticeship program are hired and retained by the contractors and subcontractors. So essentially the bid credit is an incentive for contractors to hire and earn bid credits. Lastly, the apprenticeship program. This is our program that we create demand for jobs and apprentices. So those three programs work as a whole. And if we move on to the next slide, please. So what is the Illinois Apprenticeship Initiative goal? This program opens doors for opportunity into the construction industry for building trades. It applies a $500,000 public works, including both capital projects and grants, direct contracts and awards. For applicable projects, the goal is for the U.S. Department of Labor certified apprentices, not limited to Illinois Works Apprenticeship Program graduates, to perform the 10% labor hours actually worked on each prevailing wage. Again, this is how we capture all the trades working for a project, that 10% estimated labor hours in each prevailing wage category, whichever is less. So this is what our program mainly focuses on, the pre-apprenticeship, the 10% goal. And if we look at the next slide. So this is a breakdown of our program. So again, the Illinois Works Apprenticeship Initiative sets an apprenticeship goal, which would be the 10% goal for public works project estimated to cost $500,000 or more, which includes both capital grants and direct capital contracts. The apprenticeship goal is for the U.S. Department of Labor, certify apprenticeship to perform the 10% goal. So what does the public work mean? That is all projects contracted or funded by the state in whole or in part of the project from appropriated capital funds that work under the Prevailing Wage Act. And a project is activities that are established by the agency and sets forth a grant that is on the grant agreement or contract that are funded in whole or in part by the appropriated state funds. So that is what our program focuses on, mainly on the 10% goal for each trade. And if we move along to the next slide, we can see a breakdown how we determine project eligibility. So this is a summary of how we would do the breakdown of those projects. So this depends, it mainly depends on first criteria. The first criteria is the total project cost. whether it's equal or more than $500,000. The second criteria we look at is the state contribution. So is the state contribution equal or more than 500,000 in capital funds? And then lastly, we look at we calculate the state contribution, whether it's equal or more than $500,000. Then we look at the eligibility decision. So depending on whether it's that calculation where that falls under, whether it's 50% or more, which in this first scenario, there's 4 scenarios. The first one is if the state contribution is 50% more of that total project cost. So in that case, the prevailing wage eligible work would be on the entire project, must comply with the 10% goal per trade, meaning whether plumbers are working, carpenters, 10% per each trade. So on a different note, if there's a different state contribution where the total project cost is equal or more than $500,000 and the state contribution is less, then the prevailing wage will only apply to the state funded part of the project. Well, they will need to comply the 10% goal. So if we look at the third scenario, where the state contribution is less than $500,000, meaning that the total project cost is $500,000 or more, and the state contribution is 50% or more, the prevailing wage eligible work again applies to the entire project. They must comply with the 10% apprenticeship goal. And lastly, the last scenario would be in the case where the total project cost is less than $500,000, meaning $499,000, and the state contribution is less than 50%, then the 10% apprenticeship goal does not apply. So they wouldn't need to comply with Illinois Works. So that is, in a nutshell, a summary of how we work with state agency, in this case with Broadband, to train them on how they would determine if that project is eligible to comply with Illinois Works. And lastly, after the state agency determines the project eligibility, the way they submit their project is through Illinois Works Smartsheet platform. So this is where we manage all our projects, where we monitor, where we communicate with state agencies. And this is where we set whether it's approved or where we need any additional information. This is via way of us communicating with state agencies. And I'm going to pass it over to Victor so he can go over our compliance process. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. So just real quickly, this what we're looking at right now is assuming that we're looking at a platform where we're going to be uploading projects. So I'm going to try to do my best to explain this. The stages. So, excuse me, the project eligibility requirements, that's actually early stage of the process where Illinois Works determine the project eligibility, and that means that we're going to look at a project and determine whether it's applicable to comply for the goal or not. And this actually, as you know, the agency has to conduct this early on, but when they submit it, we go for a second round and determine that. The second part of it is that we're required to have a budget supplement submitted. The budget supplement actually captures all prevailing wage classification or construction-related trades being performed throughout the life of the project, and this has to be completed by the grantee and signed by both grantee and the state agency. But only the state agency gets to upload this into their platform. It's just very important for us to remember that. The third part of it is the update form. And on the update form, that actually happens it's optional. So it can happen at any given time during the lifespan of the project. You can modify the cost, start, or end date of the project, or the loan or the grant. It has to be submitted by the state agency only. So just so you know, the grantee doesn't have access to the platform. It's very important. Third part is pre-audit reports. Now, pre-audit reports are also called quarterly progress report because what they do is they're submitted on a quarterly basis. The purpose of this report is to give to give us a picture of a progress that's being made on the project in terms of meeting the Illinois Works compliance. This report also serves as a clear indicator that a prevailing wage has been performed on a given quarter. This report also needs to be completed by the grantee or the contractor and needs to be signed by both the state agency and the contractor. And it's only going to be submitted by the state agency. One important part here is the waiver request. It's optional, but it's a very critical one. What is a waiver and what does that mean? Waiver pretty much allows an individual grantee who cannot meet the goal, the Illinois Works 10% goal, to apply for a waiver, pretty much a waiver or a reduction waiver, meaning they don't have to comply. Now, there's some things to keep in mind here. Waiver can only be submitted no later than 30 days after the project end, meaning it's best for the grantee or the contractor to submit that waiver as soon as they feel that they cannot comply. But we don't want to have someone, the project end and 60 days later, the person says, hey, I don't qualify, I want to apply for a waiver. That's not going to work. A couple of things to remember is that the waiver submitted out to the to the state agency. The state agency's job is to review the waiver, to make sure that they look at it and decide whether it's going to be approved or not, denied before submitting it to us. And one last part of this is Illinois Works will not take a look at any waiver unless we have a budget supplement on file. So even if you think that you're not going to comply, we need to have a budget supplement on file for that project. The final part of this here, and I feel bad because I'm rushing because it looks like it's going to be 1 o'clock. My apologies. The certification is actually is the closeout portion of the project, meaning that once the project ends, grantees must submit a final certification for that project. When you look at the certification, this form just provides us a final look at the progress that was made on that project in terms of meeting or exceeding the 10% goal. And we need to have that. It has to be signed and completed by the grantee. The agency gets to verify it, and then they get to upload the form into the platform for us. And I believe that's moving us to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, you skipped one, Maria, I think, real quickly. Before that, there was one before that talks about the dollar. Okay, real quickly, I'm going to go over this. We do handle like a lot of projects, and it's important for you to know how many agencies we work with and the volume of dollar involved here. We're talking about $10 billion among agencies such as IDOT, CDB, the Capital Development Board, and IEPA, and DCO. So it's important to know that we work with various agencies, and there's a lot of money involved. We want to be able to continue to monitor and make sure that people get an opportunity to at least a shot at working with us and us working with the agencies as well. Next slide, please. Now be quick. The next one, please. Good. So we work directly with agencies, state agency. What we try to do is meet with them on a quarterly basis. Also, we provide technical assistance and we monitor the progress. Sometimes some agencies, when they work with contractor, they can do very good job. The things that I kind of went through in terms of the reports that you need to submit, that determines whether you are high volume compliant, low compliance, and depending on the stage of compliance you are, you might be put on a monitor a scale where we have to meet with you rather than quarterly. We have to meet with you on a monthly basis, sometimes a weekly basis. So that's what that is. But we provide services where we can meet with agencies and talk to them again, even in real time, and have contact through the platform on a daily basis as well. Next slide, please. I think ultimately we talk about the service that we provide through successfully partnership in community stakeholders. Illinois Works office like to achieve those following goals, which is provide career pathway to residents in disadvantaged community, provide eligible apprentices with the skill for lifelong security, promote construction and viable job industry for women and minorities community, and provide construction industry and consistent skilled workforce for generations to come. We want to create partnerships between state agencies and community organizations. And when I say this, we don't look at agency like Broadband as an agency that we're policing, but a sister agency that's going to help us, assist those grantees meet those goals. Thank you for your time, and I'm sorry that I was rushing. Next slide. Those are the contact people that we have for Broadband, in case somebody wanted to see it. The one before that. Do you have any questions?
All right. Thank you so much, Victor and Maria. Great overview of a really important program within the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and that's the Illinois Works Apprenticeship Initiative Program. And so I would like to open it up for all questions now. I know we're going late, but this is really important. If any of our presenters have to leave, we understand. Again, this is recorded, so there's going to be a lot of value in this conversation after the fact. Nancy, any questions that are teed up in the chat box or anything that we would like to lead off with?
You know, I'm not seeing questions yet. Want to definitely give folks a moment to put those in there, but I really appreciate folks staying on. This is a really important topic. There was a question earlier that just sort of speaks to the function for, you know, basically we could basically sum it up, the prevailing wage topic as well as this apprenticeship program topic really can do things as, let's see, we had a earlier presenter that spoke about the rising tides, right?
Yeah.
And so that really, I wonder if we want to say anything about that, but also provide insight on best practices or barriers in utilizing these opportunities. So is there anything that we can get, you know, commented on in regards to those nuances and any sort of tips from any of the presenters for us today?
Yeah, and while our presenters are thinking about that, I would just say, you know, with the Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program, we're expecting over $1.7 billion in state and federal funding to move through that program to invest in broadband network expansion around the state. And when you look at a typical broadband bill, anywhere from 2/3 to 3/4 of the budget is going to be going towards labor. And so this is a historic opportunity for us, as it was said earlier, not only to invest in universal access to high speed, affordable quality broadband, but also to invest in our communities. And that's why I think these programs that we're highlighting today are so critically important. Prevailing Wage and the Illinois Works Apprenticeship Initiative Program want to make sure that our subgrantees and their contractors are all on the right side of state law and understand the requirements, but also that we're able to really trigger that cascade of benefits across the state and down to the local community. And so when we look at broadband, it's really an undertaking. It's not just about that access, it's about helping people adopt it, sign up for service. And then at the end of the day, how do you use it to maximum benefit? And I think the investment itself that we're making is so critical to that optimization of the investment. And so with that said, I want to just overview the contact information in front of us. Craig Colebrook, my colleague at the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. If you've got any questions generally about prevailing wage or related to legal aspects of the Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program. Of course, colleagues over at the Department of Labor, Bob Pirelli, thank you for your time today, as well as Kevin McGuire at the Illinois Office of Comptroller. Both have made themselves available to join us for this webinar and also address questions on an ongoing basis. And then finally, you know our Office of Broadband. If you've got any questions, shoot us a line at broadband@illinois.gov. Either myself or Tim Laffey, our grants manager, would be happy to get in touch with you. And so I'd like to just take a moment, any of our presenters today, any final thoughts to Nancy's question or anything that you'd like to elaborate on? And maybe Craig, I'll pass the mic to you first, and then we can go around real quick if folks have anything to say.
Sure. You know, I think the best thing I can say in terms of like practical, real world advice is that you can never communicate too much. You know, I said earlier, I'm a recovering trial lawyer, and I always used to tell my clients, like, the dirty little secret of law is that if all of you clients would just talk to each other civilly, you would put us out of business. And I think that that's true. If you are just having open communication with us, with your contractors, your subs, the employees on the project, the workers, everyone, I think you can work most of this out. We can see problems as they develop. We can address them early. It never needs to get to a point where we're talking about clawbacks or investigations or delaying funds or anything. The key is to just talk it out. There's no such thing as stupid questions. There's no reason to be embarrassed about anything. It is a niche area of law, so feel free to reach out to us at any point, and we will give you the best guidance we can.
Thanks so much, Craig. And just to riff off of that, You know, what I've observed in the last couple of years with Connect Illinois is when there's an inquiry, it's in all of our interest for the grantee, their subcontractor, stakeholders involved, to respond to that on the spot. And I think, again, going into this as a conversation before an applicant applies for funds, once an applicant becomes a grantee, and then as that grant is being deployed and the broadband network built, questions that arise, let's have that open line of communication. And then if you're asked a question as a grantee or a sub by the Department of Labor or DCEO or the comptroller, get a response to them as quick as you can. And I think that's going to drive a favorable outcome. Again, an observation.
Yeah, and let me give like a concrete example of this. Matt, you'll remember this just came up a couple weeks ago. We had a new inquiry arise on one of our projects, but we talked to the grantee talked to the subcontractors and the contractors. We all talked to the comptroller's office. We all got together and just talked it out, and we had that resolved in about a week and a half. And no benefits were paused. I think there was actually a slight underpayment, but it was corrected in about 10 days, 2 weeks, and everyone was back on the same page and everything was flowing right again. And it's all because we took the initiative to talk to each other.
Yeah, great example. Victor and Maria, you did an excellent job, I think, bringing to life the Illinois Works Apprenticeship Initiative program. Anything that you'd like to add here before you get on with your day? And I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, but this was a really important webinar, and I think this is going to live in the curation that the University of Illinois Extension offers us for a long time into the future. Probably going to be one of the more widely watched webinars we have. And so, with that said, open it up for any of our presenters before we pass the mic back to Nancy.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, in terms of best practice, I think the importance of, like Greg just mentioned, continue to communicate. You can never, I think addressing any questions and continue to communicate with state agencies. I think that is key. As Victor mentioned in one of the slides, we continue to meet with state agencies and trying to answer their questions and trying to help them and support them to reach that 10% goal. Again, this is helping our goals, helping our underrepresented populations, which are men, which are women, minorities. They give them an opportunity to work in public work projects. So again, any questions, we meet with state agencies, in this case, Broadband, in a bi-weekly basis, just to address and make sure that if they have any questions, we answer them so they can comply. Ultimately, it's to really, really help all our underrepresented communities. The bottom line. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. All right, Nancy, I don't want to keep folks on an important conversation longer than we have time for today, but just to emphasize again, start the conversation. We've got some great public servants who've joined us today. Contact information is on the screen in front of you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. We want to make the most of this historic opportunity for Illinois, and to do that right, it means we're working closely with our applicants, our grantees, our subcontractors, and our communities. And so, with that said, Nancy, thanks a lot for the opportunity today.
We thank you all as well. And we really hope everybody has a good rest of their week, and hope that you can join us next Thursday for the next webinar, and keep your eye on your inbox for the materials that we'll be sending later today. Thanks again, Matt. And as always, we're grateful, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.
ILL.
I.